Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, happy Monday to you. I'm going to warn you now, I'm working on about 3 hours of sleep. My buddy Mike came into town last night, said, hey, you want to go hang out in the suite at State Farm Arena? Pitbull, Ricky Martin, Enrique Iglesias. And for some reason, I said, sure. Yeah, my buddy comes into town, I don't know, every few weeks or so on some business. He usually crashes on the couch, flies in, flies out. It's a whirlwind, but he's a good friend of mine, and we usually have a good time. We did have a great time last night. Fantastic concert. I did not expect to see so many people at this show, and yet the arena was packed. Like, I had heard, like, ticket sales were kind of like lethargic. Whatever they did, they got the place packed out. Fantastic show last night at State Farm Arena. Anyway, enough about that. I'm not going to sit here and gloat about the fact that I got to hang out at a suite with some former radio friends, but that was a lot of fun, not going to lie. Let's dive right into the headlines of the day. We are still here regionally, locally in Metro Atlanta and throughout the state of Georgia, speaking and on the after effects of the Laken Riley killing at the University of Georgia campus. The alleged suspect has been arrested. His name is Jose Antonio Ibarra. He is an undocumented immigrant from Venezuela, and naturally, politics pouncing in an election cycle where obviously the incumbent president of the United States, Joe Biden, polls poorly against Donald Trump when it comes to the southern border and immigration, period. Yesterday, I'm watching the local TV public affairs show, The Georgia Gang, on WAGA Fox 5. And I haven't had Alicia Thomas-Searcy on this show yet, but I'd love to have her on. Her passion, her knowledge for what she's discussing really shine through. She is seated yesterday between Martha Zoller, a conservative pundit. She has a talk show on the radio station WDUN in Gainesville, Georgia. I like Martha. I've never met her, but I like her. I would love to have her on at some point in time, too, because I think she is someone you can have a dialogue with across the aisle, and you at least feel like you're having a conversation with an adult, someone who's, not in the cage flinging poo. Alicia Thomas-Searcy was seated to her right, and to Alicia Thomas-Searcy's right, Phil Kent. Phil Kent has been an editorial page editor. In fact, he and I worked together. I say worked together. We worked at the same time at the Augusta Chronicle when I was in high school and doing some stringer work while in college. Never interacted with him. I don't even think I ever met him. But he's been around the block a minute or two. And where you have Martha Zoller to Alicia Thomas-Searcy's left with rational dialogue with her conservative views, but at least platformed from a nature of respect. And then on the other side, Alicia Thomas-Searcy has to deal with Phil Kent, who just cannot be bothered but to be churlish. There, I said it. I've said it before. I think he's churlish. I'm going to give you, first of all, Alicia Thomas-Searcy's take on some recent legislation that we said last week was pinning a lot on law enforcement officers and those who work in city and county jails and putting their careers at risk for situations that they're not trained. They don't come out of the police academies trained to handle. Alicia Thomas-Searcy's husband, by the way, works in law enforcement, so you can hear her passion when she talks about this.
I have to say that the politicization of this issue is really frustrating for me. Yes, there are counties and cities who have said we are not going to participate really in the politics of getting into immigration. My husband is a former state trooper. You all know that. They go through 4 weeks of training. Immigration is not one of the things they get trained on. When I reach out to my friends in law enforcement, they are frustrated and frankly concerned about not only this attempt to enforce not having sanctuary cities, but some of these other bills that have been introduced, a couple of those pieces that passed last night that go well beyond the pale of a state getting involved in immigration. I want to remind people again that in our U.S. Senate, there was a bipartisan bill that very well could have passed, but the lawless former president sent a tweet, and all of a sudden it's over. And so we need to leave immigration law to the federal government. I'm frustrated that we are now wanting our local police officers and state troopers, some of these bills give them they are empowering them to stop people, right, based on the suspicion if they are not from this country. And let me say this very quickly. There are 5 of us sitting on this dais. There's only one of us sitting here that if I'm driving, I've got to be concerned if I'm going to be suspected if I'm here illegally. That's a problem, and those are the kind of policies that we need to stop. It's the politics that's bothering me. Focus on safety for everybody. Focus on the 100 Georgians that were killed by gun violence this year in Georgia, 10 of those kids. Don't just use this one issue, this one murder, to all of a sudden be so concerned about safety and then decide that you want to take immigration law in your own hands.
But there is one issue, maybe Phil or Martha want to chime in here. There is an issue where they're not asking the local authorities to become involved in immigration. They're asking wait until ICE can come get them if they are accused of a crime.
Let me read. Hold on. Let me read what the law, what the bill.
Filibustering the whole time.
I'm not filibustering. I'm talking about an issue that's very important. But in the bill,
Alicia, hold on. I would like Phil to answer first.
And that's all fine and well that you want to pivot to Phil or Martha. But first of all, Lori Geary, nice lady. I've known her for many years. She used to work in Augusta, Georgia media. So she didn't call on Phil specifically. She wanted Phil or Martha to chime in from the right side. And then Phil, of course, has to start needling someone. Why are you filibustering? First of all, if anybody likes to filibuster, it's that guy. And it's usually empty rhetoric when he does. But I'm going to get to the part that Alicia Thomas-Searcy wanted to bring up in correlation to what she had just said, because it fits. Here's what she said later in this conversation.
So we can agree to disagree on that. I think Democrats have had a long history of working on this issue and trying to fix it. I think Republicans are playing politics at the federal level and the state level. I want to read very carefully what one of these bills that passed last night says. The first time a jailer or sheriff fails to keep track of data on inmates who are not U.S. citizens, including their immigration status and country of origin, is considered a violation of oath of office. The second offense and thereafter would be a misdemeanor of high and aggravated nature. It goes on to talk about another bill. I'm not sure if that one was passed, but it would permit peace officers, including state troopers, to arrest with probable cause any person suspected of being in the country illegally. That is what I'm talking about. This isn't filibustering. This is putting our law enforcement officers in danger. It's making them become immigration officers. Let me finish. And doing something they are not trained to do. Jails are already overcrowded. We have a number of issues in our jails, and now Republicans who are making this issue political only because it's an election, not because they care about the lives that are being lost, not because they care about actually doing something to keep people safe, but because this is the perfect political opportunity to score political points. And that's what's frustrating to me. And this is not my opinion. This is what is in the law, or what is being proposed in the law.
But
something needs to be done about that.
Things like this, crimes like these, change laws. It's just a fact.
Again, that's moderator Lori Geary pushing back. But Lori, I have to disagree with you. Crimes like these may create changes in laws, but what about crimes like mass shootings? We don't see changes in laws there, and we don't see a push from it from the center or the right. All right, so I'm going to go back a little bit in the show because I want you to hear Phil Kent when Lori gave Phil an opportunity after Alicia Thomas-Searcy had filibustered the conversation, poor Phil, to chime in.
Look at the bigger picture here. We had in the package the mayor of Athens claiming it's not a sanctuary city. It's very clear in the Georgia Code what the definition of a sanctuary city is. And basically, you're making a good point, Lori. Once that you have somebody in your jail, you have to go to the feds, and there's a detainer. This is not being done in Athens. So the Athens mayor is just a clueless liberal liar. That's my opinion. I don't know why he keeps saying this. The whole thing with Blake and Riley is it could have never happened if we didn't have this open borders policy by an increasingly senile president who is surrounded by open border advisors. This is a 50-state problem. Georgia is affected. We have the rule of law here. I'm tired of Democrats that just try to undermine the rule of law here.
This guy is just killing me here. The rule of law. Meanwhile, he is defending at every breath the ability for the former president, the oft-indicted former president, to defy the rule of law with delay tactics left and right. I mean, Phil Kent lacks self-awareness on such a grand scale, it's not even funny. Never mind the fact that I'm just bothered by the fact that I'm just not holding back anymore. I know people who work at this station and not producers, but I just have to wonder, how do you keep allowing a pundit to come on with such vapid, empty rhetoric, just flinging ad hominem left and right? What did he call him?
Clueless liberal liar.
Like, elevate your dialogue, dude. You want to have people who may not agree with you, but could conceive of what you're trying to say if you, brought some facts and data and logic, and maybe resisted the urge to use name calling as a tactic of substantive dialogue. Just a thought. But while he doesn't mind using terms like clueless liberal liar, he takes an affront. He takes offense when Republicans are called out for really preening about safety and law and order while actually not doing a thing about it, as we saw in the U.S. House, which led the U.S. Senate to balk at dealing with bipartisan reform.
I think it's libelous to say that Republicans don't have people's safety in mind. That's ridiculous. I think we can have disagreements over policy.
Yes, we can, Phil, but if you would act more on camera like your conservative contemporary, Martha Zoller, and less like
clueless liberal liar.
That guy, I don't know, maybe we have some more substantive dialogue. Who wants to sit across the table from an ideologically opposite perspective and have a conversation with you when you use language like that? And by the way, this is not just a Phil Kent problem. It's a Marjorie Taylor Greene problem. It's a Lauren Boebert problem. It's a Matt Gaetz problem. It's a Jim Jordan problem. Republicans have gone so far from just the Reagan era. And listen, I'm not a big Reagan fanatic, but Reagan and Tip O'Neill used to work. They sat down and worked with bipartisan compromises to get things done. Republicans have long ago forgotten that getting 75% of what they want is a good thing in legislation. It works that way. And right now, they don't even want 80, 85, 90, 95%. They want 100%, but also not now. We've got to wait until after the election's over so we can use this as a political cudgel for the guy that's telling us to from his Truth Social posts. Now, I'm not going to sit here and suggest that the bipartisan Senate bill that could have been voted on in the House, that if it had been voted on in the House, would have been swept through the Senate and signed by I'm not saying that bill, had it become law, would have saved Laken Riley's life, but I am saying that there could be a future Laken Riley that bill, once it became law, could have saved. And that's where I question Republicans' true intents while they decide to hit the pause button on legislation that they've been waiting for decades to get across the aisle. So how serious are they? I say not so serious. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what some crimmigration, if that's a new term, experts are saying about the way Athens Clarke handled this. Laken Riley's alleged killer's prior crimes were too minor for ICE to even lift a finger to come get the guy. We'll discuss that after I catch my breath here on The Ron Show. Ooh. Second cup of coffee in and working on 3 hours sleep. Late night concerts for a 50-year-old man they hit differently. This is The Ron Show. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. So Rosie Mannins at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution wrote a piece that was published on the 1st, where she spoke to crimmigration, crime and immigration experts. And the gist of the story is that the alleged suspect in the Laken Riley murder, Jose Antonio Ibarra, had a criminal past that was really minor. And for ICE, it wouldn't have been enough for them to get up from behind their desks to come get the guy. I'll read you as much of this as we have time for. It is unlikely that the suspect charged in the death of nursing student Laken Hope Riley would have been detained earlier by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement after his previous run-ins with police, even if those incidents had occurred outside so-called sanctuary cities, according to legal experts. Several Atlanta attorneys who specialize in the intersection of immigration and criminal law said Jose Antonio Ibarra, a Venezuelan who illegally entered the United States in 2022, would not have been a priority for ICE based on his 2023 traffic infringement charges in New York and shoplifting citation in Athens. Police last Friday charged Ibarra, 26, with malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, kidnapping, hindering a 911 call, and concealing Riley's death. The homicide has become the latest flashpoint in the heated national debate over immigration and border policy and enforcement ahead of November's presidential election. Critics of local jurisdictions that limit coordination with federal immigration authorities, Phil Kent, say Riley's death could have been prevented if police in New York or Athens had alerted ICE that they'd apprehended Ibarra in September and October, respectively. But legal experts whose work includes representing immigrants pushed back on that theory. This quote, "The reality is ICE will not detain somebody on a traffic offense, nor will they detain them on a charge of misdemeanor." That's attorney Charles Kuck, an adjunct law professor at Emory University. ICE, by the way, did not respond to requests for this article. Reading further, Athens-Clarke County Mayor Kelly Gertz fielded calls for his resignation over Riley's death from a group of demonstrators Wednesday who claim the county's limited cooperation with immigration authorities makes it a sanctuary city. And conservative lawmakers have used the student slaying to champion legislation that would penalize sheriffs and jailers who don't cooperate with federal immigration agents when someone in custody is not a U.S. citizen. Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr said in a televised interview he posted on social media Thursday that deaths like Riley's are the result of sanctuary city policies implemented by socialist and elite left leaders. He wrote in the post that by refusing to enforce the law, the left has created a culture that coddles criminals. Here is that clip from Fox News, of course.
Well, you were talking about predictions. I predicted yesterday that the mayor was also going to engage in word games and pretend that they didn't do what they did back in 2019 and ignored the law. But that's exactly what happened. They had a group of folks that ran as under the socialist ticket, and this is what you get when you elect folks like that. The good news is there is pushback. That doesn't represent the University of Georgia. It doesn't represent the values of the state. There's a great city council member named John Culpepper that's gotten elected to push back. But as I said yesterday, this is no longer political theory. And they loved back in 2019 when it was all in vogue with the elite left to create sanctuary cities and have DAs ignore the laws. But this is what ends up happening, that we have a loss of life.
All right, back to the AJC article. Jessica Stern, a leading crimmigration attorney in Atlanta, said traffic offenses are, quote, the one area where ICE will pretty much admit that they're not going to take action on somebody. On October 27, 2023, Ibarra and his brother were apprehended by officers from the Athens-Clarke County Police Department and issued citations after being accused of stealing about $200 worth of food and clothing from a local Walmart. They were not arrested. The department said it is standard practice to issue citations for certain misdemeanor crimes, including petty shoplifting. It said its officers don't have immediate access to immigration status, which is typically checked by jailers during the booking process of an arrestee. Records show that a bench warrant for Ibarra's arrest was issued December 20th after he failed to appear in court on the theft charge. Bench warrants typically don't prompt immediate attempts to find a defendant and put them in jail. Stern said it is no surprise that Ibarra's traffic and shoplifting charges did not immediately land them behind bars, saying, in this particular instance, it does not seem unusual at all. It's not really a great example of the system failing. Emily Davis, an attorney who teaches an Emory University crimmigration law course, said the priorities for detaining and removing a non-citizen are threats to national security, public safety, and border security. She said, quote, ICE would likely not be notified in any jurisdiction of a non-citizen's traffic offense. She said the same is true of his shoplifting ticket. ICE would not have been contacted with a citation and no arrest in any jurisdiction, sanctuary city or not. Further down in this article, like all law enforcement with limited resources, ICE determines on a case-by-case basis whether detaining someone is prudent given various factors such as the severity of a crime, according to Stern. Charles Cuck also chimes in, said those who believe more non-citizens should be kept in ICE facilities should support the funding for it, saying ICE only has the money to detain about 35,000 people a night. Those beds are full. Gosh, if only we had some sort of legislation at the federal level to provide additional funding for. Gosh, if only we had a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the Senate or the House or both who could get together and come together on agreeing that some additional funding is needed for just that. Wait, what? They did? A few weeks ago? And the leader of the GOP House didn't even put it up for a vote? What? You're kidding. But all along they're saying that safety and adhering to our immigration laws are so important. What happened? Who said don't pass it? Who said wait? The guy running for president? Preening about the border? Well, isn't that interesting?
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
I always give myself a little pause before deciding, am I gonna even talk about the latest poll? But I'm going to try and do this in a okay, but positive spin. Politico. Trump leads Biden by 4 points, according to New York Times Siena poll. The poll reflects a downswing in Biden's favorability just 9 months before the 2024 presidential elections. And Democrats are literally the dog in the meme surrounded by the burning house. This is fine. Totally fine. I don't feel fine. I don't feel fine. I can, as a pundit, as someone who talks politics with anybody who'll bring it up to me, I in the same way on my show as I am in person, I can admit the realities of the electorate and the issues that an aging Joe Biden faces. I can't explain why he doesn't get a pass for being an old man while Donald Trump does. Dude is just behind him by 3 years. And when it comes to saying senile, crazy shit, it's not it's not even a neck and neck horse race. One guy says a lot of crazier stuff and really kind of falls off the prompter. In fact, he just did it this weekend.
Saudi Arabia and Russia will repeat your.
Bro, what was that? Okay. So again, I go into new polling just curious where the American mindset is. And I do my best to try and play so the Joe Biden presidency has been actually pretty good. It has. It's actually been pretty good. It's unfortunate that the American people are focused on the cost of goods and services, groceries. It's inarguable. You can't hide from the fact that inflation has affected our pockets. And it's hard for whatever reason the American public to grasp that, yeah, that's a global problem. That's not something that Biden created, and it's not something that can be easily fixed in a free market capitalist society. But inflation actually wasn't as bad here as it was throughout most of the rest of the world. Oh, and by the way, your grocery prices are likely higher because we've had tougher immigration policies to adhere to at the state level when we live in a country where upwards of 40% of our agriculture employment are immigrant. And when you drill into specific numbers, where were we here? 47% of the crop workers were unauthorized. 31% were citizens. 22% had work visas. That's of the foreign-born agricultural workers. You don't think that has an impact on your grocery prices? Duh. But anyway, I said this many times. We, the people of the United States, do not have an appetite for understanding that it's our own policies and past deeds and misdeeds that come back to bite us in the ass that are at the heart, the root cause even, of some of the problems that we're complaining about most. We can't. We're not like that. We're not wired that way. We're Americans. We don't apologize, even to ourselves, I guess. Politico, former President Donald Trump has a 4% advantage over President Joe Biden in a New York Times Siena College poll of likely voters released Saturday. Of respondents who said they were likely to vote, 48% they would vote for the former president if the presidential election were to be held today. This came out Saturday, by the way. With 44% responding they would vote for Biden. Again, I'm going to hone in on the fact that 48% said Donald Trump. 48% is not 50%. It's not 50% or better. It's 48%. And I still maintain, that has to be his ceiling. And if Biden is getting 44%, I'm looking at, what am I looking at here? 8% who are like, not excited about either one. But you got to think that if that 8% is a likely voter contingent, they're not going to throw their vote away on a third-party candidate, are they? No, I think they're going to begrudgingly come back to sanity. I just have to hope that that's the way Americans are wired. With a choice between Nikki Haley, Trump's last remaining GOP primary opponent, and Biden, 46% of respondents favored Haley, 37% favored Biden. Republicans cannot save themselves from themselves and that guy. They just can't. This spells out exactly why Nikki Haley says she's staying in the race. Like, wake up, Republicans. Not only is she the more conservative candidate, she's the more electable candidate. She's not crazy pants. The poll reflects a downswing in Biden's favorability, according to Politico, just 9 months before the 2024 presidential elections, as the president faces mounting questions about his advanced age, attacks on immigration issues, and growing frustration over the handling of the war in Gaza. And that is on the left side of the spectrum there. In a blow to the president, 47% of likely voters expressed strong disapproval of his leadership, marking the highest disapproval of Biden reflected in the New York Times Siena College poll during his presidency. Michael Tyler, the Biden's campaign communications director, downplayed the significance of the poll, writing in a statement that polling, quote, consistently overestimates the former president and underestimates Biden, and the campaign is, quote, ignoring the noise. Saturday Night Live, by the way, had a great opening skit that I'm going to play for you right now that speaks a little bit to why it's kind of hard to buy into anything that someone who works on the Biden campaign or in his administration or Democrats in general have to say about Joe Biden and his virility and his vitality and his energy level.
Good afternoon. I'm Dana Bash, and welcome to Inside Politics. Coming up, we'll give Wolf Blitzer an edible and an hour to solve the Middle East. But first, on Tuesday, President Joe Biden won the Michigan primary, but a New York Times poll today has him down 5 points, and many voters still have concerns about his age. Here with me is Governor of California and Biden advocate Gavin Newsom.
Great to be with you, Dana. I understand people care about the president's age, but what they should care about is his record. Look at what Joe Biden has done for America. He's created more jobs than any president in history. Inflation is down. The Shamrock Shake is back. And Beyonce has gone country.
All true.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Right, but can he make that case with the speed and sharpness that someone like you can?
Right.
Dana, Joe can do it better. I was just with him, and behind closed doors, Joe is incredible. Yesterday, we had a big meeting about the border, and God, he had such command. He had charts, tables, PowerPoints. He had an interactive AR display on the Apple Vision Pro that he programmed himself. The software might be in beta, but the man, he's an alpha.
Governor, I have to admit, I'm a little skeptical. This is the same man people call Sleepy Joe.
Well, he has to sleep, Dana. But even when he's sleeping, he's on. The other day, he was taking a nap, and I whipped a baseball at him, and he caught it like De Niro in Awakenings. Lightning quick. Just ask any of the people who are with him every day.
Right.
Very well. Let's go live to Washington with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre.
Hello, Dana. Pleasure to be with you to talk about the most vigorous man I've ever known, Joe Biden.
Really?
Absolutely. I was just with him. And behind closed doors, he's a whirlwind. I mean, Dana, look at his schedule. 7 a.m. Soul Cycle class. And I'm not talking about taking one. He leads it. 8:30 a.m. Plays speed chess in the park. 8:32 a.m. Wins chess game, points at opponent and says, "Next time, young blood." 9:30 a.m. Meets with Joint Chiefs for a military strategy meeting and push-up contest. 10:02 a.m. Wins contest, points at the head of the Joint Chiefs and says, "Next time, young blood." 10:03 to 11, train time. And that's all before a lunch where he eats 5 whole chickens and a raw potato.
Corrine, Biden is 81 years old. Isn't that a little concerning?
Only if you're scared of wisdom. Look, Joe Biden was 30 years old before Roe v. Wade was instated, so you know he was smashing.
Oh, my gosh.
He dealt with those restrictions then as a young, handsome man, and he can deal with them now as an old, even more handsome man. Ask anyone who works with him closely.
Right.
Well, let's do that. We are now joined live by Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas.
Thanks for having me, Dana. Man, I am exhausted. I was with Joe Biden for the past weekend, and phew, he wiped me out.
Right.
Okay, so you feel he's up to the job?
Dana, I was just with him, and behind closed doors, he's a dynamo. This weekend, we both went down to the border town of Brownsville, Texas, and Joe went into beast mode. He said, "We gotta tighten this border. Look how easy I can cross it." Then he parkoured up to the top of the border wall. He front flipped into the Rio Grande and came back up with a fish in his mouth. But you didn't report that because it doesn't fit your little narrative.
Well, with all due respect, it doesn't fit reality.
And that's the problem. I feel like we're all being gaslit. And if I'm on the left side and I'm saying this, you know, folks who are not inside the Democratic Party tent or aligned with them ideologically, progressives, you know that independents and those who may be of the never Trumper ilk in 2020, they feel like they're being gaslit too. But listen, before we go fashioning nooses or finding bridges to jump off of, let's remember that we are in an electoral college country, and it's really going to come down to 5 states. Steve Kornacki spelled this out in Meet the Press yesterday.
Yeah, Kristen. Well, look, all eyes were on Michigan this week, obviously for the primary, but also because it will be a important, maybe the pivotal state in the general election if it is indeed a Trump-Biden rematch. Take a look here. We're giving you the states as they went in 2020 in the Trump-Biden election. If you reran them, remember, the states have different electoral count votes now. Some of them at least do. If you reran 2020, Biden would now start out with 303, Trump with 235. But how did Biden win in 2020? Remember, he flipped 5 states that Donald Trump had carried in 2016. That was Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Arizona. So if Trump has a path back to the White House, it probably goes through those 5 states. Now, take a look in terms of underscoring the importance of Michigan and those 3 Midwest states. If you start with Georgia and Arizona, they were the 2 closest in 2020. Mm-hmm. So let's say, just for the sake of showing you this, that Trump is somehow able to flip those states. If he were to get Georgia, if he were to get Arizona, he would still be short of 270, and that would bring you to those Midwest states. And he would need to flip one of them in this scenario to get over 270. You could see if he were to get Michigan here, then he'd be over 270. So any Trump path back to the White House, he's going to have to win back at least one of those 3 Midwest states, and Michigan could actually end up being his best shot at it.
Kornacki is right, and I'm already willing to write off Arizona and Georgia. I don't even know what the Arizona numbers look like. But hang on, I'll look. Oh, yeah. Every major poll, Trump +7, Trump +13. Okay, that's the outlier. +7, +6, +3, +6, +9. Again, I'll point out none of them are at 50% or better, but they're all plus for Trump. You flip to Georgia, and I'm on 538's website, by the way, where they aggregate a bunch of polling. Trump's ahead in all of them. The only one Biden wins is in a head-to-head, according to Beacon Research, against Nikki Haley. And even that is an outlier because he doesn't show up on the positive in any others. So again, Steve Kornacki is right. It's going to come down to those 3 Midwestern states. So let's go to Michigan. We go to Michigan. Trump +4. Oh, you have one that's even. Trump plus 4, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 10. That's the outlier. Trump plus 4, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 1. Biden in a matchup with Nikki Haley. That's crazy. Even Haley shows ahead in 1. And then Trump plus 5, Trump plus 2. He only needs one of those 3 Midwestern states, and Michigan is showing a solid Trump lean. Although, again, I'm going to point out, none of those show Trump with 50% or better. Okay, maybe Pennsylvania will be there to save us. We flipped the tab to Pennsylvania. Trump plus 6, Trump plus 9, plus 15, plus 10. One of those is the outlier. Trump plus 5, Trump plus 2, Trump plus 8. Oh, Biden plus 5. Okay. Biden plus 1. So the Biden plus 5 is the outlier. Trump plus 5. Oh, God. So then you go to Wisconsin. Trump plus 9, Trump plus 3, Trump plus 4, plus 3, plus 2, plus 4, plus 8, plus 2, plus 3. Haley with a commanding lead against Joe Biden by 15, by 16. Trump plus 1. I got one that shows Biden plus 9 over Haley. Trump plus 3 in Wisconsin. And again, I will point out in every case, every poll, Trump is below 50%. I think we're looking at his seat. I mean, my God, we can't possibly think the guy's going to get more popular with voters. And I have to think that this isn't so much about them proudly supporting the guy as much as they're just falling back in line with their ideological alignment. I said this a week or two ago. I think a lot of the Republican never-Trumpers have seen some of the successes of the Biden administration and realize they can't, as partisans, allow another 4 years of infrastructure and investment in green energy, whittling away at student debt repayment, the possibility of a Supreme Court seat or two. I mean, it has to happen at some point in time in the near future, right? Happening within the next 4 years. I think a lot of those never-Trumpers are just swallowing their pride and going, we just can't take losses like we have the last 4 years. But the problem is they don't realize the losses are coming from that guy being atop their ticket. Follow The Ron Show on your preferred social media platforms, singular or plural, at Ron Show ATL. That is Twitter, X, Threads. I admittedly did like most and got on Threads and didn't do much. I got to do better. I don't know, at me on Threads. Send my notifications to Tizzy, and I'll be all over that, okay? So that was Twitter, X, Instagram, by the way, Threads, and Facebook, at Ron Show ATL. Follow along the journey as this show grows. We are going to be stepping into the Progressive Voices Network, as well as broadcasting 9 to 10 and 5 to 6 p.m. weekdays on America One Radio. And, of course, you can subscribe on any of your podcast platforms, iHeart, the Odyssey app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you podcast, that's where you can find The Ron Show. Progressives, by the way, are being noticed and being seen in Metro Atlanta. There were protests, a silent protest, a respectful silent protest yesterday at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock is, of course, the minister. So the students, activists, they identified themselves as students at Atlanta University Center Schools, got up quietly, took off jackets and coats to show that they were wearing shirts that said ceasefire now on the front and stop arming Israel on the back. The Reverend Senator noticed that they did so. They paused, they went down the middle, and left without saying a word. The Reverend Senator paused, noticing that, acknowledged him and said he was willing to meet after the service. Here's how this played out audibly.
Almost among those who still execute in the name of the people. And we have a strange question that we ask death row inmates. We ask right before killing people in the name of the people. And you say, what do you mean we? Well, they do it in our name. Right before executing people in the name of the people, we ask, what would you like to have for your last?
So while the protest was occurring, the Reverend Senator went about his sermon, but later said, I want to thank God for the students and the young folk who are here. I wish they'd hang out so we can talk after church. Let them know that they are welcome to stay. Let's talk after church. There's also a progressive movement in Georgia because we don't have the uncommitted option on the primary ballot to do a protest vote a different way, the way some Republicans did when Herschel Walker ran against the same Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock during the 2022 cycle. They showed up to vote, they asked for a ballot, and didn't vote. It was a silent ballot. Greg Bluestein, Tia Mitchell, Patricia Murphy, and Adam Van Brimmer at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution contributing to the Politically Georgia blog this morning, writing, as President Joe Biden's weekend rally in Atlanta nears, some liberal stalwarts want to use next Tuesday's Georgia presidential primary to send him a message about its policies toward Israel in the war in Gaza. Georgia doesn't have an uncommitted option. I mentioned that earlier. On its Democratic primary ballot, like Michigan, where roughly 1 in 8 Democrats use the method to lodge a protest vote over Biden's foreign policy. I mentioned last week that statistically it was like 89% for Joe Biden and 11% who did this. I'm sorry, it was 82% for Joe Biden. In 2012, when President Barack Obama was running for re-election, he got 89%. It's not a jarring numeric difference there. Anyway, back to the blog. He has been working to negotiate a ceasefire and has been critical of Israel's handling of the conflict while still supporting the longtime ally. But the law does allow Georgians to cast blank ballots. They point out that that's what happened, as I said, during the 2022 Senate runoff, where some Republicans made their disgust with the GOP nominee, Herschel Walker, known by showing up to the voting booth but not casting a vote for either Walker or his opponent, Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock. Friend of the show, State Representative Ruel Roman, who is Georgia's first Palestinian-American legislator, said the idea is spreading, quote, like wildfire in progressive circles ahead of next week's primary. She said, phone banking organizers that have been calling members of Congress are now shifting to this. It's completely grassroots. I've never seen anything like it, and hope that no matter the outcome, people listen. The blog goes on to say, flyers are circulating among liberal and Muslim activists in Georgia that read, tell Biden, ceasefire now. Leave it blank on March 12th. Some encourage non-voters to post the leave it blank hashtag leave it blank. The writers go to point out Biden supporters are not worried. The president plans a Saturday rally in Metro Atlanta. He's probably going to have protesters there, too. And he's certain to demolish the other two Democrats on the state's ballot, Minnesota Representative Dean Phillips, and self-help author, who's been a guest on this show, Marianne Williamson, who, by the way, quit the race and then relaunched her campaign last week. My hunch is she relaunched the campaign last week to continue doing some needed fundraising, if I had to guess. So, as if the Fonnie Willis, Nathan Wade, and Trump co-conspirator election 2020 conspiracy stuff didn't have the political world focused on the state of Georgia. Now we have about 8 days before a primary election, and we're going to have campaign stops by the president, and I'm guessing pretty sure there will be some visible and audible protests coming up around that, during that, maybe after that, and now the hashtag Leave It Blank movement will put some focus on Georgia's primary outcomes a week from tomorrow night. I want to thank you for listening to The Ron Show, whether it's your first day or your 15th month or 16th or 17th, however many months we've been at this now. Thank you so much for doing so, whether it's on the America One radio app, during the broadcast 9 to 10 a.m. We replay 5 to 6 p.m. in case you missed some of it. You can also listen via podcast anywhere you do listen to podcasts. We're on all the major platforms. Show notes. If I cited an article or you heard a clip, you'll see some citation in the show notes at ronshowatl.com. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10. Have a great one. We'll see you then.